we start to leave. My husband says he's going to go ahead and go. And he goes in front of me with the U-Haul. And I'm about maybe 5 minutes behind him. I'm down this country road and I'm next to an area where there's a creek on the left side of the road. When I say way down into the creek bed, I mean the sides are like 6 feet tall. I'm kind of going slow because I'm not used to this road at all. I'm definitely not going the speed limit. I may have been going 25, 30 maybe. I had my window down about halfway. All of a sudden, something roars in my window behind me. Keep in mind, I saw nothing. As I was coming around the bend of this road down next to this creek, I saw nothing. But when this thing roared in my window, it was so loud and there was so much air that came into the car that it blew my hair and it made my hair wet. And I screamed.
This is Bigfoot Crossroads. My name's Matt, and I would like to welcome Steph. Steph, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay.
Good.
I am excited. You've got me all hyped up now. We've been talking about some things, and I can't wait to get into this. So
Awesome.
Just, take us to the beginning.
Okay, the beginning, it was early 90s. My husband and I had moved to Indiana. We lived in a mid to big-sized town. And we lived in an apartment at first, didn't like an apartment, so we started looking for a house. A lot of the houses in town are older. The house we ended up buying was built in the 20s. Nice house. It needed just a little fixing up. But what happened was we got the house. He would go to work every day, and we were down to one car, so he would leave me there to paint the walls, clean, get everything ready so we can pretty much move in. And one of the first things, it was odd. I always felt super tired there. I was in my early 20s. Didn't get super tired at that point super fast. And got to the point where I was cleaning and stuff. And one day I was trying to hang some things on the wall, and I got in the drill bit case and looked for drill bits, and it was empty. I thought, that's weird. So he called me at lunchtime, and I said, hey babe, what'd you do with all the drill bits? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, the case is here, but they're all gone. And he said, what do you mean they're all gone? And I said, there's not a drill bit in this case. Not a big one, not a little one. They're all gone. And he said, well, that's weird. I don't remember taking them all out, but okay. So he took me back a couple days later, and I'm upstairs and I'm working in our closet, and I opened the door and I kicked something on the floor. Now, we hadn't been up there working at all. We had just done the downstairs to this point. And I get upstairs, and after I kick this, it rolls across the floor, and I think, well, what was that? And I turn the light on, and it's drill bits. And they're all in a row in the floor, in the closets, in the middle of the floor.
Wow.
Now, this is a closet that's like 4 feet wide, 6 feet long. Walk-in, nice closet. But I thought, okay. So he calls again. I said, hey, I found all your drill bits. They're in the closet upstairs. He said, what do you mean all the drill bits are in the closet upstairs? And I said, they were in a row. I kicked them, and they all rolled across the floor. And he said, I didn't put them there. I haven't been in that closet. And I was like, well, okay. And that was literally just the beginning. It was literally just the first taste of, I should have thought something is up, but you just go about your business, and
that's
think.
That's not lights flickering. That's the first thing that happened.
Right. Yeah. So I just thought, well, if the lights would have flickered, I would have thought maybe there's an electrical problem, 1920s house. But, so then, time goes on. We get everything fixed up. We have a group of friends come up to visit. It's 2 other couples. And they come up and, the evening we're having a little get together and a few drinks and playing some games and, catching up and goofing off. And we have a friend who drank a little more than the rest of us. So the next day we had plans to go out shopping and do a few things. And the next morning we get up and I asked this 6'4" friend of mine if he wants to go. And he said, first of all, I don't like shopping. Second of all, I'm kind of hungover, so I'm not going to go. So I said, okay. So we go and everything's fine. We get back and I'm in the kitchen and I'm cleaning up some mess and making some food. And he follows me into the kitchen and he says to me, thanks a lot for leaving me here by myself. And I turned and I looked at him and I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, really? Really? You're not going to tell me that your house is haunted? You're just going to leave me here by myself? And I could feel all the color draining out of my face because I just thought, okay, now wait. Now I've, heard some weird noises, the drill bit thing, bumps in the night. I thought, okay, well, maybe it was just my imagination. But here's another person who doesn't live in this house looking at me and saying, your house is haunted. And I thought, okay. So I said, why? What happened? And he said, people walk around upstairs and there's nobody up there. And the cat stares at nothing and cries. And you can hear conversations, but you can't really understand what people are saying. But there's people talking. And I'm just standing there like, okay, there might be something to this. It might not be my imagination. There might be something to this. So, let's see, flash forward maybe about, another month. It's solidly summer. Someone comes to the door. And when we get to the door, it is the people who used to own the house. And the lady says, I really hate to bother you, but my son wants to see his old room. So I said, okay, that's not a problem. We haven't done anything. It was the back bedroom. It's still the way it was when you guys left. So he runs up the stairs and she stands there and talks. And, she asks how things are going. And I just say, fine. And a few minutes later, her son comes back down the stairs and he is kind of half giggling, half smiling, perfectly content. And I'm thinking, okay, that's a little weird. But maybe he just missed home. Okay. So she apologizes. And I said, it's perfectly fine. And they leave. Well, later that afternoon, the neighbor says, I saw the old neighbor here earlier. Was everything okay? And I proceeded to tell her what happened. And she proceeded to tell me, well, their son has an imaginary friend that they could never get him to get rid of. So I said, okay. Oh, okay. All right. No, kids do that sometimes. All right. So not a big deal. So I tell my husband and he's like, oh, So things are moving along. We're still working on the house a little bit. We decide to have the exterior redone. It was just white aluminum siding, and we were going to have vinyl siding put on it. It had hail damage on one side, so we thought, well, let's go ahead and have it done. And what happened was I had chosen tan. That was a big thing in the 90s, tan with green shutters. Well, one night I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up, and I had completely changed my mind. And I remember walking into the kitchen and looking at my husband and saying, we're going to have to change the order for the vinyl siding. And he looked at me like, okay. And I said, I think I need it to be yellow. And he said, what do you mean you need it to be yellow? I said, I think I've decided I want it to be yellow. So he's looking at me like, okay, I'm not going to argue. So he calls the company and they said, no, we haven't ordered it yet. And he said, fine, you have yellow. Yes. Okay, we're going with yellow. So the company was putting the siding up. The guys came to the door and said, we always want people to look at the condition of their house underneath before we cover back up, to let you know there's no damage, no rotted wood,
Right.
nothing like that. And the guy comes to the door and he says, well, now we know why you chose the color you chose. And I said, what? And I walk around the side of the house, and my house was yellow underneath.
Wow.
I just was shocked. I just thought, well, what are the odds?
Yeah.
I had never seen any old pictures of the house. No one had ever said anything. It's not like somebody said, your house was yellow before, but it was the exact shade of yellow that it was underneath. And then I thought to myself, do they whisper in your ear at night? But it was literally an overnight thing. I went to bed, I woke up, that's what I had decided. And I just thought, okay, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of me picking the color it already was? And I've never thought to, I've never been like, I have psychic powers or, that's not, not in my wheelhouse. So yeah, that's any of my talents. But I was shocked. And even the guys, and then when I was I didn't say anything, the guys were just standing there looking at me. I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. I just walked back in the house because I thought, I don't want to freak out in front of these dudes, but I'm having a moment,
Yeah, yeah.
So, it was always things like that we were just, and I felt like, people say when we're remodeling, your remodeling sometimes is more active. We didn't do anything big. All of our work was like more cosmetic, take down the wallpaper, paint the walls, change a faucet or two, but it wasn't anything, moving walls or anything like that. But,
right.
And then another person who came, we had cats, and we had the neighbor, who was 16, come to feed the cats. And his dad called while we were gone and said, I want you to know everything's okay, but I want you to know that my son won't go to your house by himself anymore. And he was saying the same thing that the other friend was saying. The walking, the murmuring, it was just constant when people were there that wasn't it when we weren't there. It was odd that it was worse when it was strangers than it was when we were in the house.
Something I can relate to.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everything you're talking about is like, I'm just sitting here thinking like, yep, same. Especially like the murmuring where you just can't make out what they're saying. It kind of sounds like a TV on in another room.
Yes.
And,
yes.
One of the first things that I ever noticed in my own home was the walking around, the footsteps. So that was a big one. But yeah, a lot of things have happened, especially more what I consider like in your face type activity has happened to strangers and people here whenever I'm not in the room or I'm not even in the house.
Yeah. Cause at first I think my husband was thinking that we should be experiencing the same things that others were experiencing, but it was always worse when we weren't at home. But then we had an issue where we had decided we got the fireplace. The chimney was a little too small, but they told us it was up to code. So I decided that we would go ahead and get wood delivered. So I knew a guy in town. He delivered wood, and he was outside unstacking the wood out of his truck beside our garage. And he says to me, that's really a shame that little boy got killed in your garage. And every hair on my body just kind of like, and I said, and he's still unstacking, he said it like, hey, it's raining today,
Yeah.
And I said, now, wait. Did you say that a boy got killed in my garage? And he goes, well, he didn't get killed in your garage, but he was playing with gas and matches. And he accidentally set himself on fire in your garage.
That's horrible.
Yes. So now we realize, okay, now these things that are happening are, Now we know why it could be happening, or the source of why it's happening.
I mean, yeah. That's a pretty classic,
yes.
Tragic death to a child.
Yes. So I had a friend that worked at the library, and she proceeded to look in the papers, the old papers. And after a while of looking, she said that she found where this incident occurred in the early 60s. And there was 2 newspaper articles about it.
So you were able to like actually confirm it?
Yes.
Outside of just, hearsay and rumor. Wow.
After him just saying, well, he did say as he was finishing the story and unstacking the wood, that he had lived 2 blocks away when that occurred.
Wow.
Yes. But when we found the newspaper articles, it was a for sure thing, Yeah. It wasn't just someone telling you. It was documented.
Did you ever experience stuff in the garage itself?
Yes. I was very uncomfortable out there. I didn't want to spend any time out there. What was odd is when we bought the house, the wall in the back was very like the beams looked charred or black. We interpreted that as someone had let cars, even with the garage door open, someone had let a car sit in there and run.
Yeah.
Okay. But after then we heard this, when we got to looking, you could see where it was actually the outside layer of the wood had burned.
Wow.
So then we knew, yes, this actually happened and this is where it happened. So, but none of the neighbors, by then we were friends with neighbors and nobody had said anything because everybody said, we really liked you. We didn't want to tell you. We didn't want you to move away.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even tell someone that?
Right. How do you approach that? Hey, by the way, and we weren't going around saying, hey, do you think there's a ghost in my, we weren't really talking about it because we didn't want to be the crazy people, Yeah. Meanwhile, I get pregnant and our son is born. And he gets to the point where he's in a toddler bed. Well, he will not stay in his room. He doesn't say anything, but he just will not stay in his room at night. Well, if he came in the room, we had one of those mirrors on the back of our bedroom door. And it swelled in the summer. And when you open the door, it would go, it would make that noise,
Yeah.
So when he would sneak in, he would kind of try to open it slow. And then, but if my husband woke up, he would take him back to his room. Okay. So what started happening is I would put a pallet on the floor on my side of the bed because he knew if he came around to my side of the bed and fell asleep on the floor that mommy would let him stay.
Yeah, Mom.
Okay. Yes. Well, one night I woke up by my husband who has flung the light on and is frantically picking up that pallet that's on my side of the bed on the floor. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, our son is in here. And I said, why do you think that? And he said, the door flung open. The mirror made the noise. I know he's in here. Well, I said, babe, where would he be in here? He's not, he's not on the pallets. He can't roll under the bed. He's not in here. And he's like, I know he's in here. And about the time he's looking at me, and I know now he's like, because he was I think this stuff might be happening, but he's not sold. Okay, so
he's in full freak out mode right now is what's happening.
Yeah. Right. Because he looks at me and in his most serious face that I've ever seen him make, he said, I saw him come past the end of the bed.
Nope. Nuh-uh.
And I said, babe, are you sure? And he said, I saw him. So he proceeds to walk down the hall and our son is in his bed asleep. So that was the day that my husband was like, okay, maybe something is happening and you're not as crazy as I thought you were.
Yeah. Now I'll admit something's going on.
Yeah. This could be a thing. You could be right. So you know, at that moment, I was kind of glad because up until that point, I thought I could be losing my mind. You know, you have those moments of like, am I imagining all this? Have I watched too many TV shows? Is there something that I'm, you know, this should be a logical explanation for all of this. But eventually you think, no, you know, no, I'm not that crazy. You know, this has to be something. Okay. So, you know, so then I start to ask the neighbors and they begin to admit that they didn't know how to tell us, didn't want to tell us. Okay, so fine. So I go to a nearby town where they're having a paranormal investigation on a historical home. And I start to talk to this paranormal team that's out of Indianapolis. And I say, you know, I'm asking these very pointed questions. And finally, the leader of this group he pulls me aside and he said, are you having issues? I mean, do you have a haunting in your home? And I said, yeah, I really am.
No, it's said, my friend.
Yeah, it's someone else. It's not me. But he said, can we come? Can we do an investigation? And I said, sure. So I let them come, you know, and they get in the door and they sit down and they're doing the initial interview. And he said, you know, I just don't get a vibe. He said, usually if I walk into a house, I don't get I get a vibe and I do not get a vibe here. Okay. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'll just tell you what people have told me. And, you know, so the evening progresses and they have been told about the garage. So they decided, I think this was maybe mid to late January. So it was really cold outside, really wicked cold. So they go out to the garage and the one girl comes in and says, there's something wrong with my temperature gauge on my meter. And I said, well, why? And she said, because it keeps shooting up to like almost 200 degrees.
Whoa.
Well, see, the initial interview person did not tell the team. He didn't want to skew what they found.
Right.
So then she gets a different one and takes it out and it does the same thing. So the team leader says, well, let's put a camera out there and see if we can catch anything. So they put a camera on a really like a welded heavy plate. And they put this camera out in my garage. And somewhere around, I don't know, 2:40, 2:45 in the morning, this camera, the whole plate that this camera is hooked to begins to pan across my garage and it stops at the very spot where the wood is burnt.
Okie dokie.
And I'm just, I'm just sitting there and the person who had interviewed me just turns and looks like, and he's looking at me to get my reaction. And I'm like, so they go out there to make sure that nothing moved the cable, nothing made it,
Yeah.
Nothing.
Got a vibe yet?
They couldn't find an explanation. So they're like, okay, so then the whole team goes out, and goes out to the garage and checks everything. And he comes back in and he says, it's a lot different out there, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it's a lot different out there. So yeah, totally different vibe in the garage than in the house. But the only thing that ever happened in the house, and it was after, sometime after, this was these all occurred in almost a 30-year span of this occurring, living in this house. But the one thing that happened that I told my husband, if it happens again, we're leaving. We're moving. I cannot experience that again. And what happened was, on the street we lived on, there was a house across the street and 3 houses down. They had several children. 2 families lived together, and there was a lot of kids. And I always worried they were kind of playing by the road, and I just thought, well, okay, they need to be a little more careful. And I was in the house. It was early spring day. I had one of the first days of the year that I had flung the windows open, cleaning. And all of a sudden, I hear a woman screaming to the top of her lungs. And it gives me cold chills every time I talk about it. And she screams, "Oh my God, my baby, my baby." And I thought, something's happened to one of those kids. And I remember flinging the front door open and standing on my porch. And there's nothing. There's no one outside. There's no one around. And my brain I was so confused by what I had heard that I wasn't like grasping. I'm just thinking, well, who was screaming that loud? And why is no one out here? Like, why am I not seeing anybody, So by the time I had turned and gotten back into the house, I realized, did I just hear something that happened the day that boy got burned? And I asked the neighbor, I said, "You were here when this happened?" And she said, "My husband was." And he ran across the front yards because he heard the mom screaming.
Wow.
And it was like I knew in that moment that I heard what happened, because what had happened, that had happened in the garage, and she saw him run past the front window, which was a huge, big window, and land in the front yard.
That's so horrible.
I know. And that was the day that I told my husband, if I hear it again, I cannot hear that again. I mean, at that point, I had a son of my own. And I said, I cannot live here anymore if I hear it again. And he said, I understand.
Such a tragic event that is just emotionally imprinted on the property.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think, I feel like, I always used to think, is it residual? Is it like happening over and over and over again? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I was afraid of. I thought, I can't keep living here if it's going to progress. Like if I start to see the event, if it's bad enough to have heard it, to hear the anguish in her, and to just know how horrible that moment was, because I felt like in my whole soul, I felt it. And I knew at that point that if it happened again, I had to leave. I loved my home, but I was going to have to go. And thankfully, it never happened again. I never heard it again.
Did the activity continue after that point?
Yes. Yeah. It was never anything like that. It was always a lot of the murmuring, a lot of the banging, the walking. In fact, one day it got so bad, I remember standing in the hallway upstairs, and I just said, you know what? I don't have time for this today. I don't have time to worry about it. I don't have time to deal with it. So if you keep that down, that would be great. And then, it got quiet for a little while. But it was always something. It was like it was always, right when it would get quiet, then something would, I'd hear a noise or an unexplained, bang, or, it was never quite all the way away. Do you know what I mean? There was always something there.
Yeah.
But at one point, my husband went to the post office. We had been on vacation, and my husband went to the post office to get our mail. And he said, I need the mail for, our address. And the lady behind him kind of tugs on the back of his shirt. And he turned around and said, yeah. And she said, where did you say? And he said, well, she didn't look scary or like a serial killer. So I thought it was a little odd, but I told her our address. And then she said, I grew up in that house. And my husband said, oh, when? And when he said, oh, when, he realized that that was the sister of the boy who got killed.
I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording. And, I mean, what are the odds?
You know, a population of a town that is not small.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
More than 20,000, you know?
And you guys had been out of town.
Yes.
And he just happened to go to the post office at that moment. She happened to go to the post office at that moment.
At that very moment.
Happened to line up behind him.
Yes.
Heard him say something, decided to ask him about it.
Yes. And then it was her.
Wow.
Now, from what I understand, there were several. I want to say there were 7 siblings that lived in that house. So yeah, she had lived there growing up. And of course he didn't say, you know, he thought, well, you know, in my mind, I wanted to say, oh yeah, you live there with, you know, and he said, then I thought, no, you know, no, I'm not going to say anything. But even it even startled him because he, you know, because when she said, well, I lived there in the 60s, you know, then he immediately knew, you know, oh, this has to be the sibling of.
Isn't it weird when the universe just lines things up like that, though?
Right, right. Like a, you know, kind of like a little nudge of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was, you know, if the odds were that good of winning the lottery, you know, woo, but,
yeah.
but, you know, but I feel like sometimes the universe wants like a confirmation.
Right.
Like that you needed, here it is. You know, it can't get any more obvious because it was too phenomenal. Here it is. I don't know. There was a lot of things that happened while we lived there that seemed to, like, they aligned. Do you know what I mean? They just seemed to.
Yeah.
And at one point, now keep in mind, my husband was at the post office by himself. And flash forward probably maybe 3 years. My husband came home for lunch. He was starting to leave, and there was a car parked across the road. And I said, I wonder who that is, because she's staring at the house. I mean, she's not making any bones about the fact that she's staring at our house. And my husband turns around and he said, I think that's the lady from the post office. And I said, what do you mean the lady from the, and I thought he meant a lady who worked at the post office. And then he said, no, the lady who said she used to live here. And it was.
Just think about everything we just discussed from your perspective as the person living in the house, but think about it from her perspective.
Right, right.
I mean, that I'm sure sent her spiraling down a rabbit hole.
Right, right. So he goes on and leaves to go back to work, and I, you know, cross the street, and I'm like, you know, hi. And she's like, hi, and I said, well, it's nice to meet you. My husband said that he ran into you at the post office one day. And she said, oh, yeah. She said, I was just back in town, and I wanted to come by and see the house. And I said, well, why don't you come on in, and I'll fix us something to drink. You know, we'll sit and chat. And she starts to cry. And she says, I can't. As much as I would love to, I went through so much there. I can't come in. And I said, I'm really sorry. And she said, it was always a great house. She said, even to the end, when my mom passed there from cancer, when we left there, I missed it. But she said, too much happened, and I can't go back. And I said, I understand.
You no longer live there, which we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, do you feel any emotional attachment to that home?
Yeah. Well, it was knowing the story. Now I feel like I am a part of the story.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
And I loved it. I loved that house. And I raised my kids in that house. And I don't know. I mean, it was one of those things. I was ready to go. We were ready to move. We had decided we wanted to be out in the country. But it was a great house. It was a great place to live. I mean, my kids said they had a great childhood there. I mean, and eventually they knew the story. When they got old enough, I told them, because there were some things I just couldn't keep it a secret anymore. You know, there was too many noises that I couldn't. Once they were teenagers, I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell you that's a dog again. You know, I'm not going to tell you that's a dog outside. And, you know, I told them the truth. They understood, you know. But, you know, my oldest son still says, well, yeah, I really miss it there and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it was just a great house. It was a great place to live. I think I feel the connection because I lived it. For almost 30 years, I lived it. And I found everything out about this family. Well, I'm sure not everything, but there's a lot of details about this family and how some of them still live in this town, and how, because hauntings, it's so funny when you think of a haunting, you think of a long time ago.
Right.
But this one was so fresh. Do you know what I mean? It was just so,
yeah.
You know, all the emotions connected to it, all the people that were involved. And I mean, I met several people who had heard about it, seen it, helped, been there. Because you can see the emotion in people when they talk. It makes it not just a distant thing. It makes it like a very personal thing.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's why I felt that way, because I felt when she said, I just can't go in, I could feel, you know, I could just see the pain in her, and I understood. So, you know, I think that's why there was a connection there. I don't think it was more about like needing to, you know, like a house. But, you know, I did feel like when we bought it, instantly I loved it. Do you know what I mean? We had looked at several, and instantly I was like, this is awesome. And I had a desire to like make it nice and, you know, all those things, but I never felt like it was any more than just once I was involved, I was in it. You know, once I had heard about this child and seen a family member, how they suffer, then I was invested. But no, then we, you know, we decided to, you know, move to Southern Indiana and have a house built. And I thought, okay, we're going to have a house built, and it's not going to be haunted, and there's not going to be anything. It's going to be great. There's no, you know, nothing connected to the land. Okay, we didn't think there was anything connected to the land. Okay.
Building a house from scratch, you know,
yes.
Nothing's happened in it.
You're just thinking it's going to be perfect, you know. So we go to sign the papers to buy the land, and the people who are selling us the house said, hey, by the way, you know, there's the Indian mound across the road. My brain, I think, just kind of seized up for a second, because I was like, no. And I was like, how far? And they're like, oh, right across the road. I just thought, really? Are you serious? You know, really? So we come back down and look at, it's right there. Yeah, it's right there. So then I thought, okay, so immediately I'm thinking ahead. We're going to be precautionary on this. We're going to make sure that we don't have any, you know, Native American ghosts anywhere, you know. So we get to the point where the builder says, I'm going to start next week. And I had a friend who was going to come and do a blessing around the yard, and he couldn't do it. So I proceeded to look in every book and every, you know, they're not sure who built the mounds or who, you know, came to live after. So I'm thinking, okay, so I'm just going to amass all these blessings from all the tribes that are known to be in this area, and I'm just going to use everyone I can find. So my husband, who, you know, he was all in at the ghost thing at the end, so he was like, okay, I get it. So I said, you're going to help me please sage this whole place. so that we don't have a problem here. Okay. So he's like, okay. So we sage. He walks around with me and I do all these blessings in north, south, east, west. Please give us permission to live here. You know, every tree, every bush. I covered my bases. Okay.
Yeah.
So we get down here and everything's great. And we have the house built. And one day, well, in the process of the house being built, the builder called me and he said, we might have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, well, in the back bedroom downstairs, there seems to be a smell. And I'm like, what kind of smell? And he's like, I'm thinking that maybe something got between the walls and died.
Well, there goes that.
And I'm thinking and he's hesitant to tell me. And I'm like, no, what do you mean? And he's like maybe a mouse or something. And I'm like, well, okay. Well, at this point, it was just the subfloor. They weren't locking the doors or anything. It was just, old doors they used for the entrances until they got our real doors put on. But they weren't even locking those. So, people could come in and out. But we live way out, pretty far out to where we don't have a whole ton of neighbors. And everybody around here owns 20 acres, 40 acres. It's really out here. So he says to me, well, we're not locking the doors because nobody messes with anything. And I'm like, well, okay, but okay. So 3 days later, he calls and says, that smell is completely gone. And I said, so what do you think it was? And he goes, well, I don't know, but we kind of thought maybe it was just in the room. And I said, well, what do you mean in the room? And he's like, well, just lingering in the room. But it's gone now. So I'm like, okay, well, that's just weird. Okay. So then of course, my history with paranormal activity, I'm thinking, what could this be? Please tell me this is not a ghost of any sort. So, okay, nothing, that's not a big deal. So we get down here one day, we pull in the drive. They were not here working. We were here to just clean up the yard and stuff. And I look up in the trees at the end of the driveway, and there happens to be cherry tomatoes shoved up about 7 feet tall in the big pine tree next to the driveway. And it's where I had been bringing down bird feeders, things like that. I had put a bird feeder in that tree. Well, the bird feeder is on the ground and devastated. It's in pieces. No seed left, nothing. But these cherry tomatoes are shoved onto these. In fact, I took a picture of it because I thought that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And my husband's like, well, maybe somebody didn't like cherries in their salad, or cherry tomatoes in their salad. And I'm like, and they climbed up in that tree and shoved them onto branches. So there's 3 or 4 of them up there. Okay. So I start to do research okay, well, is there birds in southern Indiana that will dry the seeds out and come back? And, I'm really just trying to figure out what's going on. Okay. So I don't find anything. I asked the neighbor, hey, are you growing tomatoes this year? The people that live across the road. And he says, no. I said, okay. So the people who live behind us, we can only see their property in the winter. We can only see their house in the winter. In the summer, it's like nobody lives back there. Okay. So I happened to see them and I said, are you growing a garden? They're like, no. Okay. Well, that's the only people that are really close to us. So that explanation went out the window. Okay. So I moved the bird feeder and, we go about our business and the house is still being built and, it finally gets done. So we're down here and we're getting our stuff moved. And we had rented a U-Haul to get the last of our things, the outdoor furniture, the grill, things like that. So we had gotten down here and we were here longer than we thought we would be. Well, it's dark. And people who don't live in the country don't understand dark. But it's 10 kinds of dark. If there's no moon, you're good luck. You can't see anything. So we start to leave. My husband says he's going to go ahead and go. And he goes in front of me with the U-Haul. And I'm about maybe 5 minutes behind him. Okay. So I'm down this country road and I'm next to an area where there's a creek on the left side of the road. Well, this creek is, when I say way down into the creek bed, I mean the sides are like 6 feet tall. Okay. So I'm kind of going slow because I'm not used to this road at all. And I'm definitely not going the speed limit. I may have been going 25, 30 maybe. And all of a sudden I had my window down about halfway. And all of a sudden something roars. It's the only way I can describe it. Roars, blows, huffs in my window behind me. So imagine the bar, between the front doors and the back doors. It had to have been right there. Now, keep in mind, I saw nothing. As I was coming around the bend of this road down next to this creek, I saw nothing. But when this thing roared in my window, it roared. It was so loud and there was so much air that came into the car that it blew my hair and it made my hair wet. And I screamed. I was like, ah! So then I'm thinking, okay, don't crash. So I'm trying not to veer off there because my reaction was to turn the wheel to the right. So I'm trying not to oversteer. And I'm trying to roll my window up at the same time because that's going to save me. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. But in my mind, I thought, what the frick was that?
Yeah.
Because I can't, at that point, I'm like, what could that have been? What that made my hair wet, like spit wet, and blew my hair like that? I just don't know. And because at first it was one of those things that literally I was so shocked. The first thing, I don't even remember driving like for a while. Do you know what I mean? Because my brain was so busy trying to think, what the
hell just happened?
Yeah. Because keep in mind, I was raised more in the country. My parents were from the country. I was raised around all kinds of being outside. Okay. So the whole time, your brain's going through like computer open tabs.
Yeah.
What is this? Was it this? Was it a bird? Was it a deer? Was it and nothing. I mean, the roar deafened me. And the spit in my hair, I just thought to myself, what? So, I'm in moving, and when you move, it's the most exhausting thing. I don't know. And we had been in that house for all those years, so we had an auction. We were downsizing. I was just like really whooped, but I wasn't whooped enough to imagine spit in my hair.
Right.
So I mean, nothing logically. I mean, in my brain, nothing logically came to mind. But then, I was raised in the era of In Search Of. That had always been a complete possibility to me.
Like if you were born before 1990 and you have spent more than 30 minutes in a dark wooded area at nighttime, Bigfoot has crossed your mind. I don't care who you are.
Yes, right. You can say that it didn't, but it did. But, so, I mean, and now that this has happened and I've listened to TV shows and read books, I've never had anybody say I saw nothing. Because, I mean, when it happened, I looked in my rear view and I looked in the side mirror and there was nothing. But, I mean, it's pitch black. So, I mean, I wasn't slamming on my brakes because I was getting the heck out. You know what I mean? I wasn't slowing down. I was just making sure I didn't drive off the road. But, I mean, I've never heard anybody say they saw nothing, but then it was screaming in my car window. So in my mind, I think, did I almost hit it? You know what I mean? Did I make it mad because I ran over its foot? I don't know. But I saw nothing. Now, I didn't look in the other mirror, though. I didn't look in my passenger mirror. And I obviously didn't turn around to look.
That would have been one of those situations where I don't know what that was, and I don't want to know what that was.
Right. But best guess, if you drew a straight line from my house to there, it's about 3 miles. So it's not overly far. So we get moved in. What's odd, and I will say this, referring back to it felt empty here. Like almost felt weirdly empty, like weirdly lonely, like because there was nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost profound how obvious it was that there was nothing here in this house, in this space. And it was almost like a confirmation to me that the other place was so busy because this place was so inside not. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It almost felt.
Yeah, I know exactly. I'm having a moment because, that's something I've spent a little bit of time thinking about. People don't realize the energy that houses have.
Right. And that it was there all the time.
Yeah.
Because I remember getting here and getting everything done and sitting at the table and thinking, it's weird. and that's a odd thing to say, but it's weird to be in a space where there's literally nothing else. But then at that moment, I thought, well, I guess the saging worked because I feel nothing. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like there's someone in this room with me. I don't feel like there's someone upstairs. I just feel like it's me. And it was hard to digest for a little while. It was honestly odd, but I had to get used to it.
I mean, after 30 years, yeah, I'd imagine.
Yes.
That'd be rough.
Yes. But anyway, back to here. So we're at the new place, and the roar has happened. And I have told my husband, and we're back at square one because nothing has happened to him. Okay. He's a believer once it happens to him, and I get that. Yeah. I totally get that. Super supportive, awesome husband, won't believe unless it happens to him. So the next thing that happens was I noticed that there's bluebirds. So I'm thinking, okay, do some research. What do bluebirds eat? I had big bird feeders outside and some in the front in the pine trees, but I thought, well, bluebirds will only eat, after I did my research, they'll only eat the suet cakes that are mealworms. So I get a new big shepherd's hook. And by this time, I had learned about raccoons and how raccoons will literally mess with everything you own. Okay, so now I know, and I'm finding the raccoons, and this giant metal shepherd's hook, I take this suet cake, and I literally zip tie it to the pole. 3 big zip ties. This raccoon is not going to take off with this. He's not having this one. So, put it out. So excited. The next day, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And the next morning, my husband leaves early for work. And I get up and make my coffee and sit down and think, okay, let's wait for the bluebirds to come. Yeah. And I look out the window and it's gone. And I mean, the pole, the suet cake feeder, the whole thing.
Just gone.
Gone. So I call my husband and I said, hey, what'd you do with that bird feeder we put out yesterday? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, the suet cake, feeder thing. And he goes, well, the raccoons probably took it. I said, the whole pole. And he goes, what do you mean the whole pole? And I said, the entire thing is missing. The pole, the suet cake, the suet feeder, the zip ties. It's all gone. And he's like, well, babe, I don't know. And I'm like, well, okay. And, the natural reaction would be someone took it. Okay, well, maybe 10 feet from it is the bigger, more metal. If someone was here to steal the metal, they would have taken the one that was like 5 paces away from it that has even more metal than the one that they took. So that didn't, that explanation did not drive. Okay. Plus, it's like I said, we live out in the middle of nowhere, and when it's dark, it's dark. So, I don't see how anybody would have possibly even seen it from the road.
Yeah, scrap metal thieves approaching a house in the middle of nowhere at night. Yeah, they're not doing that.
And my brain goes to living in town.
But that's what you do. You try to solve the puzzle.
Right. So I get on the internet and I start looking. And every time I look, what would steal a bird feeder and the pole bear? Bear, bear, bear. There's no other suggestion. Nothing. There's nothing. And I'm like, okay, we do not have bears. So I'm really not sure what to think about this, so I proceed to look. I mean, I'm walking every day because now there's part of me that's kind of mad.
Yeah,
I'm like, I really like that. That was a nice shepherd's hook, I'm going to find it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to find it. It's going to be, drugged somewhere. No, it's heavy. I mean, it's heavy. So, is there going to be a giant raccoon hooked to it? I don't know, but I'm looking. So I keep looking and I keep looking. It has never been found. Never found it. 2 years, I've never found it. So that happens. Then I have an outdoor cat. His name is Butters. And one night I go out front to feed Butters, and Butters is out by the road and he's staring at something. And I'm thinking, okay. So I start yelling, Butters, Butters, and he's not looking. Now, this cat is loyal to me almost like a dog. He's not your typical cat. He's with me all the time, okay? So I am yelling at this cat, and he's ignoring me. He's just like in a trance. So he's looking at something beyond the pine trees. It's dark outside. I see nothing, okay? So my husband steps out and he says, what's wrong? And I said, something's wrong with Butters. And he said, did you call him? And I'm like, yeah, I called him. He was just sitting there, like he doesn't hear me. Okay. So I said, I'm going to go get him. Well, I have a stick next to the front door that's like when I take walks and stuff. And so I grab the stick and my husband goes, where are you going? I'm like, to get Butters. So I walk out there to get him and I'm like, Butters. And I'm thinking, is he having a cat stroke or something? He's not looking at me and I can't figure out why he's not looking. He's like frozen. He's not even moving. He's not flinching. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, Butters? And the last time I said Butters, I hear this growl. And it starts to get louder and it starts to like vibrate my insides. And I'm kind of paralyzed for a minute, and then I'm thinking, I need to move. I need to go. I need to move. And from the porch, I'm hearing, what's happening? My husband asking me what's happening. And I'm thinking, should I reach down and pick up the cat? And I decide to touch him with that stick. And it was like when I touched him with that stick, I like woke him up from whatever, I don't know, trance he was in. I'm not really sure. But when I touched him, the growl got even louder. And I'm looking and I see nothing. I am seeing absolutely nothing. And about that time I turn and I run. And Butters is running with me because now he's like not in his trance anymore. And my husband's yelling, what's happening? And I'm like, run. So I just literally run straight into the house. And I shut the door and he's like, what happened? And I said, I'm really not sure. But I said something was growling so low and so deep that it was making my insides move. And he said, well, what was it? And I was like, I didn't see anything. I couldn't see anything in the dark. So he's like, well, babe, and he said, well, what kind of animal do you think it was? And I said, I'm not sure it was an animal. And he was just looking at me like, what do you mean you don't think it was an animal? And I said, I don't know. I just don't know. So, at this point, I'm still like, is this what is happening? Because I'm still trying to grasp all these things,
Yeah.
Like, what is the explanation? Where's the dot to dot that connects all these things, So it was just like constant little odd things. I was feeding the birds out front, and I have this, like, it's an old, like, antique. It used to be a bird bath, but it doesn't hold water anymore. So I use it for like a platform bird feeder. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like it's a bowl in the middle. And what I would do is I had made drain holes, but I would put rocks over it so the seed wouldn't fall down in the holes. One day I got out there and I thought, well, the rocks are all moved. That's weird. So I go out and I go to pick up this top rock, and a bird flies out of it.
What?
A bird. So what had happened was there was a cavity, like a little cave made out of rocks that had been moved. They had been moved from, spread around in this feeder to push to one side, to when I went to pick up the top rock to redistribute the rocks, a bird flew out of it. And it startled me so bad that I squealed. And I thought, okay, that's odd. Why was there a bird under there? Like, how could a bird have gotten under there? But when I looked up, the bird feeder was completely empty. And that had happened like overnight.
Like, there was rocks taken and a bird was encased in this rock formation.
Yes, inside these rocks. Okay, so I thought this is the freakiest thing, but it had to be a fluke. And I don't know how that's in my mind. I don't know how I justified that. I don't know how that would have occurred. But not only did it happen that time, it happened one more time. And it happened again when the bird feeder had been emptied overnight. And the rocks were on top of this bird. Now, both times, they were like small sparrows. Okay, so I started to do research. Is there any Midwestern birds that will roost in rocks? No. My research over and over and over, no. Shorebirds, water birds, no. Midwestern birds do not roost under rocks. See what I mean? It just it was things that people had not, unless it's people that have never talked about it because they thought I was, they think they're crazy too. I'm thinking how, so in my mind, I'm thinking.
The bird, I have a thing about birds. The birds were like physically trapped.
Uh-huh.
Until you released them.
In stacks of rocks.
I mean, who could do that? What could do that?
Okay, so my thought process is, what could do that? Something that stuns its prey.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and my second thought process is, okay, so the tomatoes in the tree, the bird feed was gone.
Okay.
The bird seed is gone, and the bird gets left. Okay, so are they thinking that I just should be exchange? Is this an exchange? Is this like, if I'm going to take your bird seed, I'm going to give you a bird? I don't understand. I don't know.
Unless Butters has learned how to stack rocks.
I want to see it. I want to be able to see it then. But see, at that point, I'm like, is this maybe this is going to sound crazy, but in my mind, I'm thinking, is this like paranormal activity?
That's what I've tried to explain to people, is there's so many cases where people think that their property is haunted because of the things that happen.
Right. I mean, I think that I'm a pretty logical person, and I will never take anything for face value without trying to debunk or figure it out or whatever I have to do. But I'm never going to be like, I know what that is. because the universe is too big for me to go, I know what that is.
And you sent me a picture of the tomatoes. They are shish kebabbed onto the branches. They're not just laying in a fork of a tree. No.
They're skewered on there. Like, it's so intentional.
And not even at the tip of the branch. They're pushed down on there.
No, yes, they are.
And I mean, I just have to take your word for it. You know, you were talking about how high up in the tree this was, but the photograph is from a vantage point of below
looking
the
up.
lip.
Yeah. And at that point, I'm not thinking I should take a picture of this from every perspective, because I wasn't looking at it. Because at that point, I'm still like, what is happening?
I'm
not taking it like I'm going to need all this. Right. And I know I haven't lived out in the country for a while, but is this normal?
No, tomatoes and trees are not normal. I promise. Look, I used to have a really big sycamore tree in my backyard that my grandparents had half the yard was a garden. Okay. Like a huge garden, because they were country folks that moved to the city, like the Beverly Hillbillies. And so like my grandpa fought with squirrels every year about the tomatoes. And I have never seen a tomato in a tree. Just saying.
No. And I mean, it was so obvious. It was right. There's like, I don't know, 20 some pine trees in the front yard, and some of them are giant. And it was the one right at the beginning of the driveway.
Where the bird feeder was.
Yes. So the reason I struggle with all this, and I know that everybody who has experiences by no means reports them, but I feel like the things that have happened to us have not been the typical at all. Like, I've never heard anybody have like roared in the car window, or the tomatoes in the tree, or a bird trapped. It's never anything that's like normal. if that's in the parameter of normal, but.
So I've heard at least one story where somebody heard something assumed to be a Bigfoot scream or roar as they were driving down the road, not in the window to the point of where it actually wet the back of their hair or anything.
But you have heard of someone having that experience
of a Bigfoot yelling at a car as it drove by, basically.
Gotcha.
And I've heard of sticks being thrown at cars as they drive by. I've actually seen the damage of the tree limb that was thrown at a car before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Tomatoes and tree, never heard it.
Birds under rocks?
Birds under rocks, never heard it.
No.
But the connection to the bird seed is very interesting.
Yeah, that it's almost always involved with the birds.
Yeah.
I don't know. So the one night, my cat, Butters, we have he's a one person kind of cat. He was a street cat who ended up at our house, and I ended up taking care of him. And he likes my husband, but he just he doesn't love my husband. So my husband always teases that Butters only loves me. And when we are outside and Butters is around us, Butters will kind of walk way around him and come over to me, and my husband will go, Butters? Like, Butters, why don't you like me? So one night I'm outside and I'm feeding Butters, and I go to the other end of the porch, and I hear in a really loud, really deep voice, Butters. And I'm thinking, oh, funny. I cannot believe he startled me like that, while I was out here feeding the cat. And I walk to the door and I look in the window of the door, and he's sitting at the kitchen table. So basically, I turn around and look at Butters, and Butters is frozen in place. Like, did you hear that? Did you hear that? So I opened the door and I said, did you just say Butters? And he said, no. And I said, okay, Siri, you're messing with me. And he said, no, babe, I wouldn't do that to you in the dark and scare you. So now I'm thinking, okay, could be paranormal again, but it was like it mimicked my husband doing that.
Yeah.
So that's when I thought, okay, maybe this isn't, I don't know, but I'm still not saying I'm not saying what it is. I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot. I'm not saying it's a ghost. I'm just saying that freaked me out. It really like chilled me to my core because I thought that was really close. And I don't understand what exactly that was, but I know it said Butters. So, okay. So, then we get to the point where I'm questioning, everything. I'm here. My husband's at work a lot. And a lot of times if I hear something, I only hear it, me, or, I'm here by myself. Well, this last January, I was outside taking a walk, Butters with me, always with me. And we get down to the wood line where I can see the neighbor's house behind us. I've got a clear shot because no leaves in sight. And it was a warm day, and I thought, well, I'll get out and take a walk. Two really loud wood knocks, like startled me to the point where I jumped. Like, even though nobody's home, it's just me. The neighbors are not home. But it was two, I guess what they call power knocks, and it was loud. Like, close enough to where I think I could have pinpointed where it was on the other side going up the hill from my neighbor's house. So right about the time that I start to think, okay, I should probably just turn around and start walking, I get this whiff of the smell. And it was really strong. I mean, just really, really like, ooh, that stinks, And about the time that I smell it, I look down at Butters, and he has gotten between me and the woods, and he starts to like make this weird cat growl, like this, like when they're about to fight another cat growl. And I've never heard him do that before. So he definitely knew that something was up, because when that smell hit me, he definitely was like, oh, that's strange. And then I just proceeded to turn around and come back to the house, because I thought, I don't know that I need to be standing out here. And since I'm home by myself,
Yeah.
I don't think I need to be out here. But the only time I've ever seen anything, I have seen it. I can say that I'm 98.99% positive that what I saw was a Bigfoot. And it was last spring. It was probably, if not a full moon, close to a full moon. Now, it was early enough spring to, like I said, I can see the neighbor's house. And it's about, now there's a ravine between us, but straight shot, looking at their house, it's about, I'd say 110 yards, 120 yards tops. They have a barn, but it's like their house and then a mercury vapor light and then their barn. Okay. So I had gone upstairs to get ready for bed, and what I do, and I think because I live here, I just want to see what's outside, what kind of wildlife, fox, deer, whatever. And when the moon is bright, you can really see, what's out there. And I looked out that window, and I had the light off in the house, in the room, because I thought, well, if I leave the light off in the room, I can see better. It doesn't interfere with me being able to see what's outside. And all of a sudden, under this mercury vapor light, I saw a humongous shape. And when I say humongous shape, the top of its head was like almost to where their gutter on their eave hung down. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, who is that? I mean, because I've seen them out in their yard, when they're out. And in my mind, I'm thinking, they're just not that big of people, So my brain is like looking at this giant shape and trying to figure out if it's some kind of shadow, like the mercury vapor light is making someone's shadow look too big, and it's kind of standing still. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe someone's on the other side of it and it's casting a weird shadow. So I keep watching it, and I probably only watched it for like 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And then all of a sudden, it turns and begins to run into the woods. As I'm staring at it, I'm like, who is that? Because your brain automatically goes to, who is that? Not, and then I'm thinking, is that someone peeping in their windows? You know what I mean? So as I'm thinking in my brain, who is that? I realize that this person, or what I initially think, well, who is this person, is running at full speed and does not have a flashlight and is covering, because literally, I would say 10 feet from their house, the woods start, or at least the rough ground where the woods, are right there starts.
Yeah.
So this person, I mean, I think if I ran that fast in the woods in the dark, even if the moon was out, I would probably hit a tree, or they would run into something, or they would fall. But this person, not a person, now I know it wasn't a person, is running at full speed, but literally it covers this distance where I can see it in 4 seconds. And I'm just dumbfounded. And I'm like, well, it didn't see me, did it? Because I'm thinking, but I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I saw it. And that's when it clicked in my head. I saw it. And then the next conundrum that came to my brain was, I can't tell them.
They probably already know.
You know what? I don't know. I would lean on the side of, if they do, they're blissfully unaware. And that they're making excuses like I did at the house.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I did all the years when I was trying to make sure I didn't seem crazy. Because they have never said anything. Like at one point my husband made a little joke in front of them, and they were not going there. And they were like, oh yeah, really? And I thought, okay, that's it. They don't know, or they don't want to know, or they just, if they ignore it, they don't have to believe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, because I've played out that scenario in my head a few times, talking to people, and, as a former investigator into this phenomenon, there's a difference between like going out and, researching a property or something and then loading up in the car and going home. But if you lived at the location where these things are like coming up and messing around, like that would be a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I would handle it personally.
After the fact, I thought, was it looking in the windows? Does it look in the windows here?
I mean, probably so. Not to be that guy, but I mean, like,
right.
That's just the way it is.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting that as soon as you saw it, your brain went to who and not what.
Right. Because I think that's that whole living in town mentality.
Yeah. Because
I was raised in the country, and then all those years of living in town. And literally, if you saw someone in town looking in someone's window, it's a dude or it's a person.
Yeah.
You didn't think that's not a person.
Yeah.
So that immediately I was like, that doesn't look like the shape of the neighbor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do they have company? Why, because your brain, and it's so funny in 4 seconds, how many questions you can ask your own self.
Not just how many questions you can ask yourself, but also how many questions you can answer in that 4 seconds of time.
Right.
For instance, that's
a
not
logical
my neighbor.
answer.
Yeah. That's not my neighbor. That is much too big to be my neighbor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which direction did it run in? Like, what is in the direction that it was headed?
Nothing. Now, there's one house in the direction that it's headed in, but those people own like 30 acres. So literally, I mean, there's houses out here dotted, but there's so many places that it could be that nobody would even know.
I mean, you said that there's a ravine between the properties.
Yes.
And like, I mean, where I come from, they like to use geographical features like that to sneak around people's properties.
Right. And even at the back of our property, where that goes into that ravine, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to observe any of us doing anything that we're doing if it's on its belly and it's coming up that ravine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that hard to keep an eye on anything or what people are doing just from that perspective.
So I assume after this event happened, you told your husband.
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
I believe you saw what you saw. Like I said, super supportive, but something's gonna have to happen.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
Yes. And then, 3 other times we've been gifted with odd things. And one was just this week.
Really?
Yeah. First thing that we got gifted was in the back, there's an old barn. And I decided to leave it and kind of put an area by it where we have the fire pit and things like that. Well, they put, timbers around, they put some gravel down and things like that. Well, the first thing that we were gifted was a really, it's like as big as my thumb doll. And it was laying on the landscape timbers last summer after the guys finished that work.
A doll.
A doll. Now you're talking a doll that looks like it's been in the woods for I don't know how long. It's got a lot of hair, but it was just covered in mud. So I asked when the guys came back to do some more work, I said, hey, did you find the doll in the yard and put it in? And the guy was like, no. I was like, okay, just checking, because it was laying back there. And he goes, no, I don't remember seeing any doll when we were finishing up your work back there. Okay, so I saved the doll, and then fast forward, I'm taking a walk back there, and I find a putty knife, and it's the kind that has a little groove cut out on the side. And I bring it up front, and my husband comes home, and I said, did you lose a putty knife? And he goes, no, I don't have one like that. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, where did you find it? And I said, back there behind the barn. And he said, no, that's not mine. I have never seen that one before. He said, do you think the guys left it? And I'm like, well, they didn't do anything with putty, so I'm not really thinking that they would have. But of course, when they came back, I said, have you guys, it's yours? And he was like, no, it doesn't belong to us. So just this week, I was back there in the same area, by the fire pit. And we haven't even had a fire. The weather's been so weird and it's been so rainy. We haven't had a fire pit or anything yet this year. And I looked down and there is a tiny spoon. So I'm talking like a kid spoon or a baby spoon upside down on the gravel. And I pick it up and look at it, and it's not familiar. It's not one of our spoons. I've never seen it before, but it's bent. I mean, it looks like it's been run over by 16 cars, and it's filthy.
And everything that you're finding is back in the same general area.
Yes. And now, because I'm thinking to myself, if it's a gifting situation, I don't know why these things have showed up when they've showed up. It wasn't like they, this week, like I said, we haven't had a fire pit. There's been no leftovers or food left, or it's not like there's been anything back there to get the gift for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they've just shown up kind of for no reason, or at least I'm not understanding the reason, or I don't know the reason. But just this week is when the spoon showed up. And I did send a picture of it to my husband. And I said, hey, this showed up back here. And his response was, "That's weird."
I often wonder if we're just assuming that they're responsible and
Right.
it's not, I don't know, a raccoon doing it.
Because even in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, say it's a crow.
Right.
Yeah, I know they've been known to carry stuff around. So I think, well, so I've purposely, started after the putty knife, which was kind of large for a crow, but I thought, well, I'll feed them in a certain spot. Well, from what I've read, if you get gifted from a crow, they will gift you where you feed them, which is not anywhere close to where.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reluctant to use the word gifting. Like crows will take stuff that they want and they'll go to a place where they're being fed and they'll drop that so they can eat and fly off without it.
Right.
We have.
Oh, I see. Accidental gifting.
Yeah. I mean, we feed birds in our front yard and we have a bird bath in our front yard and there's these crows and there's just one in particular that, we have a little seashell in the bird bath and this crow has been trying to get this seashell for a year. And it's just too big for him to pick up. He can't do it. But he'll get it out of the bird bath and into the yard. And I mean, I've stood at the window and watched him do this. But he wants that seashell so bad. My point was, I just wonder that, okay, they're leaving these things. Sometimes I wonder if they do that just to watch your reaction when you find it. And to see if you'll notice it and if you'll take it, what you'll do.
I gotcha. Because even my husband said, well, now what are we supposed to do with the spoon? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, he's like, well, do they get offended if you don't take it in the house? And I'm like, I don't know.
The native belief around here was if you find something in the woods, you leave it in the woods because it doesn't belong to you. And that if you actually take it in the house, that makes them mad.
I didn't. Just so you know, I haven't taken these things in the house. Because, I'm still thinking, is some of this one thing and some of this, because, I still, like, there's so many coincidences that I've experienced. And I don't know. I think, is it some things are just because I'm observant? Or is it just the universe says, now that you know that these things are possible, anything is possible? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
So people who had never had had never had an experience have never maybe made the connection, used that thought process. I don't know. But I just think maybe some people, like my neighbors, would be like, well, okay, there's a doll, throw it away. I don't know. I don't know if because the realm of possibility that I've seen what's possible, that I can grasp that the obvious is not the obvious.
Well, for sure. It makes you look at the world entirely different.
Right.
You ask questions. I think that's the key.
Yes. Because the assumption is if it's not obvious to you, then maybe you just don't think in the same way that other people do.
I mean, most people, would, for instance, with the bird feeder, the mealworm incident, where they took the entire thing, most people probably aren't going to research it out and see, okay, well, what could have taken that? What is known to take that? What could it possibly be? Like, most people are going to be like, somebody stole my bird feeder. Can you believe that?
And at first I thought, well, I'm sure it's a possibility. And I probably in town would have assumed someone just took it.
Well, sure. Sure.
Because it happened. We lived in town. Things disappear.
Yeah.
So that would have just been like some thug took my bird feeder.
We had a little naked concrete baby in a bird bath in the backyard, and somebody came into our backyard and stole it. What do you need a little concrete naked baby for?
Well, somebody must have really needed it. Really needed it.
But out in the country where people will shoot you,
Yeah.
Where people
Right.
have dogs that live outside, they don't really go snooping around people's property at night.
No. And everywhere around here that there's a gate or a pole or, you know, the universal, I've sprayed it purple. So that means,
yeah.
Don't even look this direction.
Yeah. You've been warned.
Yes. Yeah. See the purple? Don't come in. Yeah. And everybody does that down here. Everybody. So no, I really don't think. And see, you know, going back to the whole builder thing, when he said it's stuck in here, you know, when we first got the property, the barn had the worst funk. And it was like a smell I could not even approach. It wasn't like, oh, that kind of smells like this or kind of smells like that. But it had the weirdest smell. When the builder called and says, I think something died in here, I'm like, well, you know, but anything could have come in the house.
Sure.
So, you know, my thought process was, okay, well, was it a stinky homeless man? I don't know. I was thinking, but when it went away that fast, he said if it was something that had died, the smell wouldn't have gone away that fast. Well, then after that, something in the back of my brain thought, maybe we should go ahead and put a lock on those doors, even if they're not the doors that are going to be on there for good. How about we just lock them? And that way, if it is a stinky homeless man, they're not going to be in here when nobody's here.
It's just that mentality of, you know, trying to solve the problem. You coming from, you know, more of a city type area and everything. That's where your mind goes.
Right.
And maybe it was just something died. You know, but that's the thing.
Now there's something dead in the walls. Is that what you're telling me? Because they left it. Yeah.
No, I mean, just the quick rundown. I mean, obviously, there was Bigfoot living in that barn, and then you built a house, and that pissed them off. But now they've gotten to know you, so they're more accepting. So they're bringing you gifts. So there's a peace offering.
So here's a doll baby.
Yeah.
Here's a really scary, dirty doll baby.
You know,
I was really hungry, and I just wanted to.
We were going to eat Butters, but he's okay. You know, we like him.
We like Butters. Butters.
I mean, that's just what I that's my assumption. That's what I would, you know, read everything as.
I mean, I guess I'm lucky that, you know, I wasn't scared at the old house. I'm not scared here, you know. This is our dream house, though. And if anything starts to go sideways, they're not winning. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I will do whatever I have to do in my power, but we will not be going. So it's good. I guess I'm not scared to be here.
Well, let's just round out the trifecta. Have you seen any strange lights in the sky?
Yes.
Of course you have.
Now, only once. And I have to say that it wasn't. Okay, where I told you the ravine behind the house is. We have a porch on the back. And we were sitting out there one night, and literally it looked like pointing straight up into the sky. I mean, not quite round like the bat signal. It was more oval shaped. But it literally looked like someone had a really powerful flashlight, but it shone all the way above the trees and into the sky, oval shaped.
From the ground up.
From the ground up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if someone's back there, that is one heck of a flashlight. And I look at my husband and I said, do you see that? And he said, yeah, I see that. He said, do you think that that's someone with a really powerful light over on the other property? And I said, I don't know, but that is a dang good light. And just about the time that I said it like as fast as you could see it go, it like left. And when I say it left, like the oval part of the top of it, you know, like where I thought the light ended, literally shot to the left to the point where you couldn't see where it went.
Could you see a light beam coming up from the ground?
No.
Okay.
So it wasn't like the light was coming through the trees.
Right.
So it wasn't like I could see the origin of where this oval light was coming from, but it was definitely right at the top of the trees. Right above the top of the trees, which are not small. and I could not see where it was coming from. So that's why I thought maybe it was oval shaped, because I thought if it's coming from the property behind us and they're shining it this way, then we're only seeing the oval part.
Right.
But when it shot off like that, I was just like, what is that? And my husband looked at me and he was like, yeah, you saw that. I saw that. And I was like, yeah, I saw that. And he said, what was that? And I said, I don't know. But that's the only thing we've ever seen. And I don't know that it's out of the realm of possibility that somebody had a really good light. The people who live way behind us shining at this in this direction. It was really like the way the fastness that it left, or that they moved it, was kind of incredible. And like I said, I couldn't see the beam coming through the trees. I could only see the end of it, the oval part of it.
Right. It's just so weird to me. I'm desperately trying to figure out the connection. And like you said, it could just be once that door's opened, you start noticing other things. But it's just fascinating to me how just even myself, for instance, and many people that I have talked to, it's never just one thing. No, it's like once they've seen or experienced one thing, then how many times have they said, yeah, I've experienced that too. And, maybe it's just, hey, once we've unlocked that ability, we can. Or once we've acknowledged that something is possible, then anything else is possible. You are going to have to keep in contact. I definitely will. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot more conversations. I think so too. I think so too. Yeah, I don't think it's over by any means. Thank you for coming on and sharing everything. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been awesome. I'm going to be thinking about this one for a long time. A lot to think about. Thank you so much. And if you've had your own encounter with Bigfoot, dogman, aliens, UFOs, ghosts, anything at all that you can't explain, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. If you get a chance, check out bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.